How many years did you say you've been doing this for the Academy?
This is our 16th season.
Yeah.
16th season.
How long has it been going on? I thought...
Well, the Academy was founded in 1964 after the World's Fair. They had a Hall of Distinguished Illinoisans.
Wait a minute.
1964.
64, right. What World's Fair?
New York. New York. They had, do you remember, since you've been in Chicago, do you remember a lady named Virginia Marmaduke, by any chance?
I remember the name, but...
Worked for the Sun-Times and the Tribune, and was on radio and TV up here in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
She worked, there was an exhibit that Illinois had at the World's Fair, and there was a Hall of Distinguished Illinoisans.
Oh.
And it was so successful, they liked it so much that Michael Butler and a number of people came back and thought, wouldn't it be nice if we did something for Illinoisans who have achieved some rank and some status? And so they went out and did their research. They researched the Nobel Academy and the French Legion and a number of other things, and came up with a ceremony and a set of criteria that they thought would do it honor. And this is 2014 will be the 50th anniversary, and we're going to put together a sort of, if you will, greatest hits reel for the Academy. And we've been doing some print production for them, some view books and things. We've worked with them for 15, 16 years now, and it's a wonderful group of people.
Who are you? When we say we, who are we?
The Lincoln Academy, or two of us.
Yes.
Well, we're from WSIU Television in Carbondale at Southern Illinois University. The Academy was on our campus in 1995. We offered a bid for production services. They liked our work, and they haven't had anyone else do it since. And
I wondered.
yeah, it's been marvelous. We've done a number of artists over the years. The Joe Brothers a while back. They were an awful lot of fun. One of my favorites was at the Art Institute, Preston Jackson, who was head of the sculpture department there for a number of years.
Oh, I didn't know him.
And so you get to meet a lot of extremely interesting people.
I bet you do.
And it was fun yesterday with Dawn, because I did radio news and television news for a number of years, still do some. And so I've covered her for probably the last 30 years of her career. And it's really nice to do that. In fact, yesterday we picked up a little bit of material for a documentary we're doing on the late Senator Paul Simon.
Oh.
Paul eventually came back to Southern Illinois and founded a public policy institute.
Yes, he did.
He's good friends. He's wonderful to us. So we've been picking up some additional things over the years. And last summer when we were up, we picked up interviews with Carol Marine out at Channel 11 and Andy Shaw when we were in town. That was when we were taping Mary Dempsey down at the library. So, this has been a wonderful project. You get to meet wonderful people like yourselves and see things that, well, frankly, you only see in museums.
Oh, must be going into all the homes of the people. Yeah. Do you always interview them in their home? It
depends. It depends on what they're doing. With Mary Dempsey, of course, we were down at the Harold Washington Library, and we've been at the Argonne National Laboratory. We've been all over town.
Did you do Walter Massey? Huh?
No, I'm afraid not. No.
I think that wasn't he an honoree one year?
What's it?
Walter Massey. He was at Argonne. He's now the head of the School of the Art Institute, but he's been all over the map.
No, this was Arnold Schriesheim, just as he concluded his career there. Let's see, Sandy Boyd, we did him.
Sandy's an old friend.
Where is he now?
Iowa.
Yeah, I believe you're right, yeah.
He still lives there, retired there.
Yeah, I was friendly with his wife, who wrote, was a writer.
And his successor, John McCarter's an old Very close friend of ours.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
At the Field Museum.
Yeah, I unfortunately never had the opportunity to meet him, but I've heard an awful lot of good things
He's a
about
real
him.
gentleman,
good,
and
yeah.
a real talented guy.
The thing that strikes me about working with a lot of people in Chicago about how everyone is on a first name basis with everyone. You just
It's a
pick
small
up,
town, Chicago.
It is. You just pick up the phone and things happen. It's marvelous.
If you're active, I guess, in any way, you tend to meet everybody else. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the relationships around here. Well, we're ready to start, and thank you once again for allowing us into your home. We appreciate it very much.
You're welcome.
The biography that I've seen states, and this is what Reverend Davis said during the convocation, was that a lot of this began with a Paul Klee lithograph presented as a wedding present some years ago. Is that how all this started, Richard?
What?
Well, isn't that the one that you got? Did we get that as a wedding present, or did you get it as a graduation
You mean
present?
the collection?
Yeah, the collection.
Wasn't sure. We had a few things in our very first apartment. My family was friendly with a woman, former Chicagoan, who went to New York and opened a gallery, and she did give such a gift, yeah, to me and my sisters at various occasions, like graduation and marriage.
Richard, how did you get started in all of this? How did you get the bug for this?
How did I get started? Well, from the time I was a youth, I apparently had some kind of inborn interest in the visual arts. I think it only became obvious to me when I hit the high school years. I went to Hyde Park High School in Hyde Park in Chicago, and the 1 year I was at Hyde Park, I was taking primarily courses in arts because I had been going to another school before that for the prior 3 years, and they didn't provide that kind of an education. And in Chicago in those days, quite a contrast, a changeover from what it is these days. It was a requirement. You couldn't graduate from high school unless you had a year of music and a year of the visual arts. That's part of a year. It's doing drawings and sculpture and taking photographs, which had been an interest of mine for a long period of time. Come out of the service, still with no idea what I was going to do for the rest of my life, but figuring I was going back home to Chicago and I was probably going to go work for my father. By the time I got back, he had other plans for me. And it had to do with another interest of his, a hobby of his, which had to do with recorded music. And he had, together with some other people, had developed a device, a particular kind of a phonograph. That's a whole long story unto itself, but the upshot of it was that he was going to start a little small business to manufacture this particular kind of a phonograph that he had developed. And he thought that was something that I could look after for him. So that's what I did. I came out of the service and I went into this business. He called it the Gray Line Engineering Company. Very pretentious name for a manufacturer of a small phonograph process. Of course, in the meantime, I had come out of the service and I had met Mary and we'd gotten married.
You didn't say, yeah, what another thing you happened to find besides my beauty and intelligence was a wonderful collection of art that my parents were pursuing.
That's right. That's right. In between there, when I came out of the service and met Mary, I met her and I discovered another world of the visual arts, which I had no knowledge of before. Her family were art collectors. They had a very fine collection of art, and they were generally culturally much more involved than I had ever been, and a family of music in the family, amateur musicians, and of course a lot of art. So after being married to Mary, I found myself immersed in more so in this world of the visual arts, in spite of the fact that I was making my living with a job in this manufacturing company, which I did for over 10 years.
Mary, let me ask you, what kinds of art did your family collect? What did he see when he met you beyond your beauty?
Yes, my father was a jeweler, so I suppose that had something to do with his eye, much perhaps. The wonderful and then available art of the time, French, Leger, Picasso, Miro, Clay. That was his first collection, and the best of the collections that he had at that time. Later on, because he doesn't have endless sums to devote to this, he sold those wonderful things and went into contemporary art. Abstract expressionism being the art of the moment. And unfortunately, he died very young.
But so you started to you already had an appreciation, and there, thanks to Mary's family's collection, you start to see the real thing right there in front of you.
And it wasn't just the collection, because by becoming part of this family, I also found myself part of a particular milieu in Chicago of collectors and people who were interested in collecting. And so I saw all kinds of art of significance and met the many serious collectors around town and the few dealers and so forth. And all this was extracurricular, of course, because I was busy making a living and starting a family. But I was absorbing an awful lot about the visual arts for years.
These early sort of in the 60s collectors or 50s collectors were, my father ran a course in art, modern art.
In his home.
Based on a syllabus from UCLA. Yes, and so we met these people too. The ones that became the owners of famous and wonderful collections.
What genres attracted you early on in terms of your own personal collecting?
Genres of art. What kind of art?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, this is early on. This is well before I became a dealer. We attended, well, first of all, I was learning about very sophisticated art, because that's the sort of thing that these people, Mary's parents, and their contemporaries were all collecting. And it was either French classical modern, Picasso, Leger, people like that, or surrealism, which an awful lot of collectors in Chicago were interested in at the time. And we got to meet those people, so I saw a lot of surrealist work that was being collected by a lot of the active collectors in town. And then towards the latter years, when they got more interested, and some of these other people got more interested in American art, abstract expressionist art, I became exposed to that too. We became exposed to that. So I saw a fair amount of that and got intrigued with it. So by the time, 10 years after we were married in 53, 63 is when I wound up, it's a story all unto itself, but I wound up as an art dealer of all things. Certainly nothing I had prepared for or thought about, and so I carried with it the experiences I had had all these years in the world of art.
Well, it struck me, when did you know that you knew enough about it to strike out on your own like this with a gallery, and you're doing your own collecting and selling?
In retrospect, I haven't the vaguest idea how I had the chutzpah, I think is a word that's floated out there, to go into a world of professional that I had no professional training for at all, and little knowledge except that which I had acquired out of these relationships all these years. But I had a strong sense of my own eye. I knew what I liked. The old expression, he knows what he likes. I don't know anything, but I know what I like. And I knew what I liked, so when this opportunity presented itself, or a suggestion was made that I think of becoming an art dealer, and actually it was made to me by an artist friend of mine, and he was just trying to give me something of an idea of something to do which not only he would enjoy seeing me do, but that would keep me occupied while I found something more serious to do with the rest of my life. And I was out looking around for another kind of a business to get into, not necessarily related to the one that I'd been in, but some kind of a business, because I had business experience. So it just intrigued me, and I had known enough about it, I had enough of this impulse, creative impulse, that I decided to open a gallery. I had no intention of being in it much more than a year or something like that. I figured, you know, it would be fun to do it.
Well, and we knew other young art dealers.
Yeah, we
at
knew
that
other
time.
dealers.
Yeah, they were just people.
I talked to dealers and I talked to collectors and a whole variety of people and got a sense of what I was letting myself in for. And I had some strong ideas about what I liked and what I thought was worthwhile and what I was going to enjoy dealing with.
What were those guiding principles that you started with? You said you had
At the very beginning, I was intrigued with, and this partially was reflected in my interest in draftsmanship, which I developed as an architecture student. I was interested in works on paper and in drawing. So I had this idea. My initial impulse was I'm going to go in business, and nobody was dealing particularly in that. Most collectors weren't that interested in works on paper. They were interested in paintings and sculpture or something. And I got intrigued with the idea of dealing. I thought there was a niche for me to fill. So I started the gallery with the intention of really dealing in works on paper and draftsmanship. And I took on a few artists, some faculty at the Art Institute of Chicago, a few other people. I met some people in New York. And for a relatively brief period of time, I tried to concentrate on relatively small, intimate works on paper. I learned very quickly the one thing that I had failed to discover before I went into business was that there was not much of a business there. And I wasn't going to suddenly make one where there wasn't one. And there wasn't much interest. So I very quickly started to expand my interest, the business interest, to dealing in sculpture and drawing and things of all that nature. Can we take a minute's break?
Yes.
Will we answer the telephone? Unfortunately, that's something.
Oops, no. Oh, you could bring a telephone.
Last week, so.
And you're learning it too?
Yeah, it's
So,
not that bad, but
So
anymore you practically need a training seminar to try and navigate with the thing.
That's true.
You want to reel it again?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we were talking about that. The collection is encyclopedic. There's a little bit of everything here and a lot of great stuff.
Well, it's it's a reflection of us. It really is. Our tastes are very broad. I mean, early on in my life, in my career as a dealer and as a collector, I used to walk around like this all the time because I was almost embarrassed by the fact that I didn't have a specialty, so-called specialty. Well, turns out in retrospect I had a real specialty, a lot of them, but I didn't have a typical specialty. And people had the idea that in order to do the right thing, you had to really concentrate and focus, which is true in all kinds of disciplines, right? But as you can tell from what I've been doing around the community as well as personally in my whole life, I never believed in that notion. I think, everybody should really be covering the landscape in addition to being a specialist. Sure, be an expert, but you can be also broadly educated, broadly interested, broadly involved, collaborative in your activities, all that, and there's so much in life to experience and to participate in that way that I can't imagine the notion of being too tightly focused.
When I was studying ancient art, we did collect some. I was interested in having it, but I was also conflicted because if you look at it from an academic view, you do not want to encourage looting and digging in. So we bought some, and love it, but
never
yeah.
since.
No, but then tried to respond to that.
And by the way, of course, that's the whole aspect of our collection. And we've really got 50 or 60 things in that in the ancient art field, and all of that's from way before the 15th century that we talk about the exhibition we had at the museum was.
I was going to say, I've seen a couple of things where that's way before.
We didn't,
Well, in the other room you'll see
we have
some primitive and ancient, and Egyptian and Etruscan and Greek.
But it does
Roman.
encourage looting to encourage.
Yeah, I've kind of followed that from the aspect of people looting Native American sites around the southern end of the state.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
Certainly a flip side to all that.
As we close, I always ask one question. What about your life and career have given you the most personal satisfaction? You've kind of touched upon that a little bit, but I'd like something along those lines to close with.
Well, I guess you cannot avoid the reality that we're human beings, and I guess there's no question but that a very special special way of responding to that kind of a question is to say that our relationships, our personal relationships, our family relationships, are exceedingly and extremely important. And I guess I have to say, come first when the end of the day. And as you grow older, of course, it becomes increasingly obvious, even not to others, of course, I suppose, but certainly it becomes increasingly obvious to us where the values are. And I don't know if that's really an answer to the kind of question you're asking, though.
I think for everything, I've not been involved in the way that my husband is, but I have been involved in things too, and I think we've had an opportunity to make wonderful relationships with people through those we meet in these areas. And it's enriched our life. If we've helped there, they have enriched our lives. That has enriched our lives greatly.
That's a perfect ending point.
Oh, good.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Is there anything that I might not have touched upon? I think I tend to be kind of encyclopedic if I can.
Well, I don't know. You've done that extremely well. I mean, this is the sort of thing.
We didn't talk about our children.
we're at the stage in life, and apparently the station or the place in life where it's almost frightening because you wonder what's going on here. But I think we've probably been interviewed in one fashion or another at least a dozen times.
Well,
wow.
There's a sort of phenomenon.
In the last 2 or 3.
I see.
I mean, the Smithsonian Institution and the Archives of American Art, and I don't know.
The thing is, you've never...
There's books,
You've never been old before, so this is a new experience.
We weren't ready for it.
Yeah, I'm finding it sneaking up on me. I had no idea. I was having too much fun. But this is wonderful. If it's possible, I don't know what you found that although you were really interested in works on paper, you needed to expand your horizons because people they had other interests other than that.
The realities were confronting me. I was trying to start a new business from scratch, and so I expanded a little bit. But I did pretty well, astonishingly well, because even before the first year was out, I was already in the black. I was doing enough business to pay my rent, which was about $135 a month, and I had a part-time helper.
In a one-room gallery.
In a one-room gallery in East Ontario. And the rest, as they say, is history, because I was in it all those years up until recently. I mean, I'm still more or less in the business, although I'm semi-retired, and my son runs the business. Business is still active. We have the gallery here in Chicago, the Hancock Building, and another one in Madison Avenue, New York.
I just saw that on the website. That's going to be really exciting. One of the things I read about your philosophy was you were in business for the serious collector. if someone was really interested, you knew how to hook them up with the right people, with the right works. Some galleries are more artist-driven, representing artists. Am I correct in that?
Sort of. I really did both. From the beginning, I represented artists from the beginning, some artists, but I also traded in the secondary market, we call it, buying and selling used pictures, if you will. So that would be artists that I didn't necessarily represent, or for that matter, might not even be alive anymore. So I was trading in that area, as I do to this day. I mean, it's a very significant part of our activity, is trading in the works of art who we don't have any direct relationship with.
For the layperson, and I know just a little bit enough about this to be dangerous. What is it? There has to be an informed eye. You have to understand what you're looking for and looking at, and there has to be discretion. There has to be a sense of trust between you and the potential client. What are the qualities of a good collector and dealer?
A good collector, not a dealer. You're asking the question about the qualities of a good collector. I don't know exactly how to answer that, except to say that people should learn to trust their own instinct as quickly as they can. They should expose themselves as widely and as intensely as possible to all kinds of visual stimuli, because it's a training job. You're in the business of training your eye, and your eye gets better the more you look, and the more you look at things, just like every other sense that you have. You develop the sense, a visual sense, by looking at things, and you find new collectors, emerging collectors, discover in themselves certain proclivities, certain interests, certain directions, certain things that they like better than others, and they should follow those instincts as best they can. Of course, they should use whatever expertise they can have access to, hopefully to good, honest, helpful dealers who might direct them in certain directions or help them sort out their own reactions to things, and it all develops over a period of time.
Mary, I want to ask you, at the time this is all happening, you're working toward your interests in art history. Am I correct?
Yes. Well,
What was happening with you?
well, mostly I was taking care of children. I did go to graduate school, not right away. I think the children were older. I never had studied art history, so I decided I should, and I did. I was interested in ancient art, actually. That's what we lived in Hyde Park, and a friend of mine and I decided we could learn about Egyptian art by going to the Oriental Institute regularly. So we did. It wasn't enough, and they started a docent program, and my friend and I were in that first program. We learned a lot. And then I decided I should take a few courses. I took a few courses, and finally I enrolled for a master's degree in ancient art, because that really interested me.
May I interrupt to suggest that Mary's being a little bit modest. Of course she learned about and knew about art. She grew up with it. It was all around her. She lived immersed in a milieu that was loaded with art, physically, and then among the people that would come and go from Mary's family's home, there were artists. They weren't all visual artists, but they were musicians, they were composers, they were
It's true.
authors, you know.
In the last years, I think about my upbringing and think it was amazing, all the things I was able to see, have, be part of. Very lucky. So then I did this graduate school, and I ended up writing about public art, which was interesting, something I didn't know about.
I want to pursue that a little bit further. Chicago is a city that has just a treasure troves of public art. No matter where you go, it seems you're looking at something wonderful and significant. We'll let Roger get out from behind you there. The microphone slipped on us a
Oh.
little bit, but you're fine. You're fine.
You're right.
Yeah. It's a terrific city with so many gems, architectural gems, but a lot of public art.
Right.
And you did a wonderful book on that. Tell me about the book.
Well, I did two books.
Two books.
The first
One
book,
one on sculpture, one on
Yeah.
murals. Yeah.
the one on sculpture, I did with a man who actually was married to my aunt, who was an architect and had decided to do such a book and needed someone to do it with. So it was I that did it. It was marvelous. It was a whole occupation because I was always going somewhere. I knew that I grew to know the city so well.
What are your favorite pieces of outside art, public art?
Oh, of sculpture?
Yeah, sculpture.
Oh dear. Well, I guess I also was active in an organization called Friends of Lincoln Park, and we were busy trying to restore and save the bronze, the old bronze. So I'm fond of them, the Lincoln and
The traditional, older.
Yeah, I guess I am interested visually, but I'm also interested historically in most things. So those appeal to me. Certainly I like modern sculpture too, and I think Millennium Park is a great place.
Oh, that's terrific. There's another book too on the great public murals.
On murals, and they're really interesting. And that was an opportunity to get to know the city very well, driving everywhere. And particularly interesting was the historical art, WPA art, that took us. I ended up traveling around the city with another woman who was also interested in this, who became the owner of a conservation laboratory. That is what she does now. But then she was also interested in the art, and so we drove together everywhere. And the schools were fascinating. The murals were wonderful.
Who were some of the artists that people might recognize that created art here for the murals during the WPA era?
I don't know that I can remember easily.
I'm just curious.
I should. Do you? Yeah, do you remember?
That's your field.
I knew them all. Yeah, it's been a while. I'd have to think to give you an answer. Now I'm going to.
I can look it up.
To do so, yeah.
And work it in. But they were doing those all over. We actually have some wonderful examples down in the southern part of the state.
That's right.
You do, and there was someone I know that did a little booklet on post offices in the state. You may have seen that.
There's some pretty decent murals in the Illinois State Capitol. I work there a lot, and they're fun to look at. And
In Springfield.
yes,
Yeah,
We
we just visited there a couple years ago.
Yeah, that was interesting.
yeah, they're doing a lot of restoration there. I want to move a little further ahead. As the gallery developed, you had relationships with the various museums, the Art Institute, with the Smart Gallery at the University of Chicago and other places. How did your interest reach out and work within the Chicago artistic and cultural community for its improvement? It's always been vibrant, but you've just seen it in the past few decades really blossom into something special here.
There's a kind of a special aspect to that for me, in that, in addition to my interest in the world that I make my living in our private life, our interest in the arts in general, and cultural life in general, I was also, from very early on in my growing up period, interested in the community. And I was involved increasingly over the years in more and more public civic activities. You and I were talking about WTTW, where I've been on the board for 30 plus years. I don't even know, 33 or 34 years. I don't know. How did I wind up on that board? One, because I had an interest in civic enterprise and exercising my skills, maybe, or what my interests in doing this, and the other was because a very active member of that board, one of the founders of the station, I had become a very close friend with a man by the name of Irving Harris, and he was active on the board, had been one of the early chairmen of the board, and he had this notion that what the board needed more was some people from the community who actually were involved in the arts. And you'd be surprised how few people there were then, or even now, active then. And he asked if I would be willing to join the board, and that's how I wound up on the board, because of that connection. Okay, but that was a reflection of something that there was some precedent for it already in my life. And following on that, over the years, I became involved with the symphony and theaters in town, the Goodman Theater, Steppenwolf Theater, all kinds of civic and cultural activities. And in the university, I got involved with the university. I got interested in educational institutions. But I'm losing track of what the point was I was trying to make to you. What were your questions?
You were making it beautifully along the lines of the burgeoning arts and humanities culture here in Chicago. I'll work it this way. And we talked about this a little before we started recording. Chicago strikes me a lot as a small town where the people who are interested in certain things all know each other. Talk about those relationships and how that helps the arts, fosters the arts here.
Well, I think the operative phrase or word that you're dancing around here is collaboration. Chicago is unique. Maybe some people say that Minneapolis is a similar kind of a community. Maybe it's a Midwestern thing. Chicago is a community where people collaborate. Institutions, rather than being competitive with one another, and that's not to say that they are, to some extent, of course, but they do cooperate a great deal. And not only within their particular realm, like, for instance, in the theater world, it isn't just other theaters that theaters tend to cooperate with and share. And you know, if you look at the roster from the major theaters in Chicago, you'll find that there's a lot of names that show up multiple times, both among their artistic directors and people, and of course on their boards. A lot of overlap, and this is a pattern throughout the city, where people do collaborate. I mean, we have activities in Chicago. We had for 11 years something called the Chicago International Theater Festival, which I was one of the founders of and was the chairman of the board of at the end of the day. And one of the things that we had accomplished was making the concept of collaboration among, rather than competition among, the people in that field. And then it went beyond that field. When we founded in Chicago the Chicago Humanities Festival, was something similar to that. And it was founded with the principle right from the get-go that we need to collaborate with all other cultural and arts institutions in town. And we started right out by doing that, bringing in family members, if you will. And today there's probably 50 or 60 different institutions around town, all of whom are partners with the Humanities Festival. All right, so there's a pattern like this across the board. There's a lot of common people who serve on boards in different fields and cooperate with each other.
And another thing about that strikes me is that it's not just reserved for people who are interested in the subject so much, but it's also made accessible to the public. There's a lot of these institutions you've just been mentioning have incredible outreach programs that go out into the schools, out in the communities, and they bring the kids into the museums, and it's wonderful.
Right.
I'm sorry, honey, I was going to say, part of it is a reflection of the culture among the funding community. You know, the MacArthur Foundation and the Community Trust. And all this, this whole world is kind of unique in Chicago too, because even there is this tendency to cooperate among each other.
And all the head, I think Jim Cunha, when he was head of the Art Institute, invited, also was strong in collaborating with others.
That's right.
Bringing
He came to town, a stranger to town,
Yeah.
but one of the things that intrigued him about the city was this culture of collaboration, because he'd been in New York and a variety of other places, in Boston, where he'd worked, where it was more typically the case that these institutions were really competing with each other and didn't. When he came to town, one of the first, and I met him when he first came to town because I was already very interested in the Art Institute. I wasn't on the board yet, by the way. One of the first things that I helped him do was to make relationships with his colleagues. Well, one being Deborah Rutter at the Chicago Symphony. And from the first day that he came to town, and Deborah was new in town at the same time herself, they collaborated.
Yeah.
Up to that point, here they were across the street from each other. The Art Institute on one side, the Symphony the other, and they had absolutely nothing to do with each other. There was no collaboration. They really viewed, institutionally, there was this sense of competition. That changed immediately at that point.
We're all the richer for it, no question about it.
Yes.
I'd like to ask about how here in recent years you have shared your collection. You've exhibited it at places like the Art Institute. There, of course, is the new project at the University of Chicago. But if you would, tell us about how you wanted to make sure that other people can enjoy what you've been able to gather over the years and what you hope in the long term happens with it.
Well, I guess for both of us, the notion of giving back is something which just we take as a given, just automatic. We've had very, very good fortune in our life. We've been able to do things that a lot of other people maybe have not had the same opportunity to, and we get the real gratification and satisfaction comes from sharing. Sharing is, by the way, teaching is one aspect of that. So we're very interested in educational institutions, and we got involved with the University of Chicago because we lived in the neighborhood. Mary actually didn't go to school there. Well, she did for graduate school, but she went east to school. I went to public universities, the University of Illinois. But we lived in that neighborhood. We raised our family in that neighborhood, and I personally, Mary also, of course, sort of adopted that university. So we wanted to share whatever it is that going on in our life that we thought would be useful in that setting.
And then he became active at when they established an art museum, which they hadn't had before, right? At the university, the Smart Museum. It was founded in the 60s, maybe.
Oh, it did? There wasn't one until then?
No, that's relatively recent.
Wow.
And the first director of that museum was a friend of ours on the faculty of the Art History Department, who was the first director of the museum. He lived across the street from us. We lived on Hyde Park Boulevard.
Ed Mazer.
So we had a sort of association, but it was sometime later after Ed Mazer, I think he might have even passed away, there was another director to the museum, a man that we became friendly with when he was originally working for the Oriental Institute and subsequently was hired by the Smart Museum to be its director. And he got the idea that, and by the way, the museum was set up as a piece of the whole puzzle of what made up the university. And the board, the director was a faculty member, and the governing board of the museum were all faculty members. And it was, it existed, it was established for the purpose of serving the universities solely and completely. in one fashion or another. By the time this other young man became director of the museum, they were already beginning to think they would be a little more ambitious and believe that they needed to not just serve the university itself, but also the community, the larger community. Then they were thinking of the larger Hyde Park community, you know. So little by little, over a long number of years, they finally, at his suggestion to the then president of the university, who was Hannah Gray at that time, they agreed to invite onto its governing board people who were not faculty members. Myself and one other person got invited to serve on the board at that point in time. And to make a long story short, several years later, I was asked to become chairman of that board, which I was for 15 years, up until about 5 years ago now that I stepped down. But in the meantime, they saw their mission on much broader terms as it is today. It is not just a university museum. It is an institution that cooperates with, that sends exhibitions out, brings exhibitions in, and the whole world is their oyster. They collaborate. Everybody in town, they collaborate with every other institution in town, and they collaborate with institutions all over the globe. And the SMART has become has got a worldwide reputation.
And it's developed from being a neighborhood institution, which it was for a while, to a citywide.
Very much so.
That's right.
And along those lines, you keep going back to that word, Richard, collaboration, and that describe how that is key, if you would, to the newest venture, the Richard and Mary L. Grace Center for the Arts and Inquiry.
Okay.
That's
another whole world.
Yeah.
Well, from the first time I became active at the SMART Museum, and therefore closer to the institution, and I, right from the beginning, I had this notion that the museum was not really being collaborative enough with the rest of the university, let alone with the whole community. It had a sort of an insular, it was the art department who was running it and so forth, and so they somehow were not really reaching out enough, bringing in. So I found myself trying to encourage that director I talked to about, and a couple of subsequent directors that worked under me for the years I was there. I was always pushing the idea of getting more of the other departments of the university and aspects of involved with what's going on there. And I was doing this at a time when the university was still something that had a reputation for being, which was not exactly the most hospitable place in the world for the arts. I mean, their interest in the arts was purely at the academic level. There was art history. There was music theory, not, they didn't have a music, people didn't play music at the university. There just was not a great emphasis on the arts. It was viewed by most of the departments and most of the faculty as a frill, like most of our society used to in those days. So, of course, I thought differently about such things. I don't know why. And so encouraged us. Okay, anyway, so there's been a long period of years now, almost 18 or 19 years, maybe almost 20 years, since I first got involved with the university. And in those years, things have done a complete turnover. New people, new faculty, new presidents, blah, blah, blah. And now, as we sit here today, the university has officially, Board of Trustees, everybody's on board to the notion that the arts do matter, and they're right up there along with philosophy and medicine and law and all the various aspects of the humanities. It's right up there with the rest of them in terms of it's important and it's critical as a critical component to what an education means and to become an educated, cultured human being. Okay, so this is all sort of background, and I have for a long time, of course, thought to myself, one day, when I get to the point, and if I can afford it, blah, blah, we would like to do something for the university among the few institutions that we were particularly devoted to. As we got older, we started thinking of some kind of legacies here and there. So we came up with this, after a lot of years of conversations with faculty members and people from the administration and so forth, we developed this idea, which has then officially been now adopted by the university, in the cooperation between the university and the Mellon Foundation, which is a very principal supporter of it, and our little piece. We got the pleasure of having our name attached to it. This enterprise, which is called the Richard and Mariella Gray, or the Gray Center for Arts and Inquiry. And what it's all about, of course, is a whole complex landscape of activities and interests which are devoted, among other things, to that point, they call it the intersection between the practice of art and the study, the scholarly, the academic on the one hand, and the working, practicing artist on the other hand. Among the activities that will go on under this rubric are fellowships. We'll be bringing working artists, composers, painters,
writers,
actors, all kinds of working artists from every possible artistic discipline will be brought onto campus for a program, for a weekend, for a 6-month residency, whatever it is, whatever is appropriate, in which they will interact and intersect with faculty and academics in one or another different kinds of programs, and of course all involving the student body. And that's what that is, and it's, of course, as you know, it's just been established. I think it was finally announced to the public on the 6th of July. And we have a great future there.
Well, I love the interdisciplinary approach to this, and scientists, for example, learning about the arts, vice versa, and it's very holistic. I really like that.
Yeah, there's so many intersections, and there's increasingly academics in various fields have come to accept the notion that creativity is as fundamental, is certainly as fundamental to what all of them do as it is to people who just are in the arts.
So mention the positions like Larry that people hold, like Larry Norman. These positions that are not strict professorships, but are.
I'm not sure. What's your,
the type of people that are
going to be active in this program?
Yeah, running it.
Well, although people are running it, well, yeah, that's right. Oh, boy. David Levin, who's been appointed the executive director of the Gray Center, is a scholar. What is his field?
Well, he is a professor. I don't remember.
Professor at the university.
Field, yeah.
I'm actually blanking on what his specific field of interest is, but he is a public intellectual, as we like to use that phrase, if there ever was one. The guy who's an extremely intelligent, intellectual, articulate guy who covers the whole landscape, both in his particular fields of expertise, specialty, but everything. I mean, that's why the president of the university, Bob Zimmer, selected him to run the center. But of course, it's something they do, that he does, and other people that are going to be involved in the program, all in addition to whatever the regular academic appointments,
other fields, right.
Teaching.
As we draw to a close here, you're still pushing new projects. You're still working in new areas, like the establishment of the gallery in New York City. What are some of the things on the horizon for you?
Oh boy, I don't know. I sort of when we finally signed off on this Gray Center, well, we still have something else out there. Actually, more than one thing out there. We're still dealing with the issue of what happens to this collection we have assembled over these 50-odd years of collection, and that was shown at the Art Institute, the bulk of which was. It is a collection that we are dedicated to devoting to the public. It's something that, and our children are all on board on this whole subject, is that after we're gone, this collection will go, not necessarily all one place, but will all go for the benefit of the public. So belong to a museum or universities or what have you. Obviously, the institutions that we're closest to stand first in line, but we are also have been for some time and are regularly in communication, conversation with the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the National Gallery in Washington, and a lot of institutions, both here and abroad, who for one reason or another have particular interests in particular aspects of it, because it's a collection that's a little bit encyclopedic. It covers the 15th century to the 21st century.
Like the one comment I heard from the fellow who saw the exhibit down here, he said, "Well, it's all here."
It's all here. Huh.
Oh dear.
That's okay. You can grab that if you want.
All right.
You can stop down for a second. Sure.